Dr. McCloskey.
Okay. Hey, Ron, when you get a moment, can you allow me to have screen sharing
Oh,
too?
yes. Sorry about that.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dan McCloskey, professor of psychology at the College of Staten Island, and we are mid-class here. I have students here in class. They did presentations for class last week, and now it's my turn to do a presentation. And because the timing worked out and the class is the topic essentially, I think it'll be great. So some of my students in the class have heard some of this before, but there's some new stuff here, and for the first time we get to see their leaderboard, see how the students are doing in the class. So that's exciting for us. Okay, so let me start my slide presentation. Great. Okay. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm a professor of psychology. I've been since 2007, and I love my job. I think it's a really wonderful job. It's the best job in the world, but there's some pressure that comes with the job. We have sort of endless possibilities in the minds in this room and in the minds of every room that we teach. And if I don't do a great job of conveying the importance of some of the things that I teach, they'll probably go on to do great things, but maybe not do the great things that I've inspired, right? So one of the things that I'll talk about is sort of how I think we can leverage technology. And in my case, we're using blockchain to improve the way that we deliver higher education to students. And we call that Pebble. So in the mid to late 1800s, when mass production, assembly lines, factories were very much in vogue, people decided to take an assembly line approach to higher education. And what happens, especially in introductory level classes like this class of Psych 100, more often than not, and Psych 100, introductory psychology, is the largest scientific-based class in the country. 1.4 million students take it every year. What happens in these classes is that a lot of students take them. They're general education classes, and we need to find ways to get many students in a small space. And that winds up being stuffy classrooms with lectures, midterms and finals, and students probably only learning a little part of what they really should learn, and not necessarily the important stuff, and maybe not learning why it's important. So I consider this to be a centralized system. The students in this class are dependent upon me to deliver instruction in a good way, but I may not do that for them. I may not speak to them. And so part of what we're doing is trying to solve that problem of centralization, that information is coming from only one source. And I call this a Sesame Street problem, which happened to me probably about, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, when I was giving a lecture in my neuroscience class on how the brain acts during sleep and talking about the importance of sleep. And so at the time, and I stopped doing this for this very reason, I would start with some kind of video, a song or something like that. And so on this particular day in probably 2015, 2016, I walked into my sleep lecture and I played a song that I could sing for you now in its entirety, but you don't want me to do that, called Everybody Sleeps, which was a song on Sesame Street. Yeah, they're laughing. I could. So Everybody Sleeps from Sesame Street, probably from the mid-70s, right? And this was a song that played recurringly on Sesame Street for years and years and years when I was a kid. Sesame Street was probably one of the biggest parts of my education. And I walked into this class, I played the song and looked around with a knowing smile and saw nothing but blank faces, right? So students looking at me like, what are you doing? And I said, oh, this is a song from Sesame Street. And still half the students were like, what's that? And I was like, oh, it's a show on PBS. And students, PBS. Oh, it was a television show for children. Okay, now I get it, right? So the experiences that I had when I was young and the way that I learned things when I was young, I hate to say it, but I'm a little bit older than the students around me, may not be their experiences. And that may not be only due to age, it may be due to, parts of the world that we grow up in, socioeconomic status, race, all sorts of things, right? That what I've learned in my quote unquote real world examples that I deliver to students may not reflect their real world. They may not understand what the hell I'm talking about half the time, right? So that's part of the problem of centralization, is that there's a high reliance on the quality of the instructor to deliver good information that students can relate to, but they don't always. The other problem is is this going to be on the test problem, right? Which is, I can talk about this, talk about my research, talk about things that I'm really excited about and want to share with my students. But in the back of their minds, they're wondering, how am I going to grade them on this? Whether they're, is he wondering, is he going to ask me a quiz question on this or a test question? What do I need to know, right? So that creates another centralization problem, that it's a flawed system, that all students are worried about is how I'm going to see what they know, right? And not necessarily worried about learning stuff, because learning stuff is the reason that they're here in college in the first place, but they're more worried about why they're learning. So one of the ways that we've tried to approach this is to decentralize the college classroom. I'm still here in front of the class lecturing, but in about 15 minutes, peer leaders will come in, take our students into groups of 6 to 8, and they will go off and work on some of the stuff. So rather than on the left here, we have a centralized structure where the professor is at the center of the circle, interacting with 100 students, and all of those students rely on the professor and only the professor to give information. We can create a system on the right where the professor still plays a role, but students have interactions with one another and with peers, and can disseminate information amongst themselves, right? So if I do a really bad job of coming in and talking about some 1970s Sesame Street reference, somebody else in the group of this student might actually explain it much better than I can in a way that they understand better, right? So by bringing peers into the classroom and letting students talk to other students that may have something in common with them, there's benefit to be gained. I didn't invent peer-to-peer instruction. This has been around since, McCloskey and other folks for, about 200 years. So it's not something novel. But one of the problems in large format lecture classes, and, if you go to Hunter College or Stony Brook, where I went to school as an undergrad, our Psych 100 classes are 600, 800, 1,000 students, right? So where's the peer-to-peer interaction in those sorts of formats? So a few years ago, thinking about this problem, I was learning about blockchain, and I'm going to give a little overview of what blockchain is and try to explain. We could do an entire lecture, an entire series probably on blockchain, and still not fully understand exactly how it works. But the concepts behind it are very simple. Blockchain is something new. So whereas the internet is probably the biggest innovation in my lifetime, blockchain is probably the biggest innovation in our students' lifetime. It is a reforming of the internet in a way that relies on peer-to-peer discussions and peer-to-peer changes of information. And what it is at its simplest form is a public record of transactions that is verified by peer-to-peer information sharing. So if I say I did something, if I say I gave someone something, then there's a whole system that verifies that that's accurate. And then in a way, I can't go back and change that information. So it has something called immutable. We can't mute the things that we put up in the blockchain. Once they're there, and they're part of historical record forever. Because of the way that blockchain is organized, people call it the trust machine. That for me to say something or put information on the internet about a transaction that occurred, maybe information that I gave to students, or some money that I gave to somebody, or some data that I shared, other people, thousands of people, really their machines, have verified that that thing took place. And once it's verified, you can't go back and change it, because we all agreed that this thing happened, right? So blockchain, the reason that it's a more recent innovation is because it's only since 2008 with this paper on the right by Satoshi Nakamoto that we understand how blockchain works. And Bitcoin is when I talk to people about blockchain, the first thing they ask is like Bitcoin. And yes, the answer is yeah, like Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the first example of blockchain. Satoshi Nakamoto developed the idea of blockchain to launch Bitcoin. And Bitcoin essentially is a bankless, a decentralized money sharing platform, right? That I can give money to somebody else without having to go through a bank, without having to go through, PayPal or Zelle or anything like that. It's me to you, and nobody's taking any transaction fees. It's a direct transaction. I give you the money, you accept it, and our community verifies that the money exchanged hands. They verified that I had the money to begin with, and they verify that you have the money now. And that's really the essence of what Bitcoin is. The price of Bitcoin can change very dramatically because most of us don't really understand it, and most of us aren't sure of what's going to happen to it. Will it ever be hacked? Will people ever be able to change the algorithm so that if I say I'm giving you money, somebody else can go in and say, nope, Dan gave me that money, and hack the system. So far, it's been launched since 2009. There's been no evidence. There's been attempts at hacks, but because of the way that the system is built, it's hard to say anything's impenetrable, but it's pretty good. It's got a pretty good thing going. So in our classroom, we're not giving out Bitcoin to my students' dismay. But we use blockchain in a different way, which is what's really behind Bitcoin. And blockchain has been used, not so much in education, but been used in many different formats. For example, people are talking about the materials and goods supply chain and how blockchain will change that. So the materials and goods supply chain is that if I'm making a case for a cell phone, for example, I need to source the plastic. I need to source the little, maybe a different type of plastic that goes over the camera screen, maybe some color, things like that. I get those materials, me as the person who's putting this thing together, send them to a factory for assembly. Then they go to a store, and then somebody purchases it. So there's a very clear path. But one problem is the factory that we assemble in maybe has some violations and shuts down for a month, or maybe there's a fire or something like that. And that is a centralized structure that there's really only one place in some cases that we can build these phone cases, right? So that's, in some ways, for a business, that's really problematic. You don't want your resources to all come from the same place, because if something happens to that place, then you're in big trouble. So people have thought about ways to decentralize this by creating alternatives to factories. Maybe you have a bunch of people with 3D printers who can do the same exact thing that takes place at a factory, but maybe they get some money on the side to print this little piece, 1,000 of it, with some quality control. And their job is to print these little pieces for the cell phone case. And somebody else's job is to provide the color. And somebody else's job is to assemble everything and then get it to the store. All of those people in a gig economy can earn part of that money that would have gone to the factory. It supports more people, and it's decentralized so that nobody's at risk. If one person who 3D prints the plastic piece goes down, there are other people who can take their place and fill in that role. We wondered whether blockchain can also decentralize what I'm calling the knowledge supply chain, which is what happens in the classroom. So students come into the class seeking knowledge. There are places like their textbook and their professor that they gain the knowledge from, and then they go on and get their diploma, right? So we can really, I hate to say it, because it's me, but take me out of the equation. It doesn't need to be a professor standing in front of the room for students to learn stuff, right? Students can learn from one another. They can learn from students who have taken the class before. They can learn from AI. They can learn from all different sorts of places, right? But somebody needs to verify that the learning took place. And, then we still mint diplomas, right? So we can take the centralization of the classroom away too, just like we can take it away in the business setting. So to test this, we kind of put together this idea, which is called Pebble. And Pebble stands for Peer Enhanced Blockchain-Based Learning Environments. So the peer enhanced we'll talk about is peer-led team learning, and blockchain-based is leveraging this blockchain that we can do peer-led team learning in large format classes, and then learning environment allows us to make a nice acronym called Pebble so that we can think about it. And there's a quote from the Dalai Lama about how pebbles can have impact. Single pebbles dropped into the water, the actions of individuals can have far-reaching effects, right? So the idea is that we're creating something that hopefully will go on beyond this classroom and that students will bring with them into other classes. So like I said, I did not invent peer-led team learning, and neither did David Gosser at City College, but he was a chemistry professor who really did a lot to bring it to the fore and show how it can be used effectively in a college classroom setting. So David Gosser is an advisor on our committee that's doing this Pebble project. And he's, like I said, from City College of New York, and he initially saw very good outcomes that students who enroll in peer-led team learning, which means that students break up into groups of 6 to 8 students as part of their class and meet with a peer leader who has done the class before and has done a good job, exactly what we're doing in this class currently, have a profound increase in their ability to get an A, B, or C in the class. So we consider that a success because for classes, especially like this one, D's, F, and W means that the student can't go on. If a student gets a D in this class, they can go on and take other classes, but they can't be a psychology major until they take this class again and get a C or better. And that's true for a lot of classes. So A, B's, and C's are considered to be success in these classes. And as you can see at City College in Chicago, Pittsburgh, Kentucky, New York City Tech, and Rochester, across the board, when students take these peer-led team learning classes, they perform much better or more likely to get A's and B's. So just talking to each other and to a peer leader who has been successful in the class makes a big impact on their performance. But as you'll notice, a lot of these classes are really lab-based classes. General chemistry, general biology, organic chemistry, all of these are what we consider traditional lab-based classes, which means that the student population is probably smaller, about 20 students. And so you're talking about 3 or 4, maybe 5 groups of students. So we wondered, one of the problems of managing peer-led team learning groups is keeping tabs on the groups. Are they performing? Are they meeting? Did the meeting take place? Is everybody there? Did the peer leader show up? All of these sorts of things, which, our class currently is about 40 students, so it's still manageable. But as we scale up to 100, 200, 600, 1,000, who would be able to manage whether all 100 of those teams met during the hour that they were supposed to meet? So blockchain helps us with that. So this gives a summary of peer-led team learning. When I recruit peer leaders, I tell them that they're Sherpas. They're not designed to describe how to get up the mountain. They're designed to show students how they got up the mountain, how they succeeded in the class. They're not there to instruct the class. They're there to coach students and show them the right way to get up, just like a Sherpa would help you get up a mountain. And these are groups of 6 to 8 students who meet regularly with a student who has succeeded in the class. They don't instruct the students, but they help them find the information they need. They take place during class time. So we're going to break out for 1 full hour of our 3-hour class today, and students are going to meet with their peer leaders and may spend that time doing homework or may spend that time doing other stuff that's related to the class. All I ask is that they do something related to the class. And it creates a healthy competition between teams as they compete for tokens and prizes, as we'll see in a minute. In fact, some of our peer leaders are walking in now, talking about how great you guys are. So one of the ways, and certain fields like psychology suffer from this, and if I'm teaching a class in chemistry, maybe, or in computer science, showing students how the things that they do on a day-to-day basis in class, developing techniques and skills, makes perfect sense to them, right? But here I am talking about Vygotsky or Piaget or some of these dead psychology people, and students are sitting there saying, I'm going to run a business, so I have no idea why you're telling me any of this, right? I'm here because I need that 3 credits for my general elective, right? That's what motivates, that's what's putting the butts in the seats, right? But my job is to show the students, and every professor's job is to show the students why the content that they're learning matters, and matters beyond what they do in psychology, right? So what we do is we look towards what's called the NACE competency, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, which is a foundation of thousands of CEOs of companies and college administrators that think about what benefits college give to people when they go into the workforce. Why should people go to college? It answers that question. It says, you know, employers say, we like college students because when they graduate, they demonstrate critical thinking and problem-solving skills, oral and written communication, teamwork and collaboration, digital technology, leadership, professional work ethic, career management, and global intercultural fluency. These are all things that we do in my class, and we do them in every class. Every class contains some portion of all of these traits, right? So my job as a professor should be to distill everything that the students do into these competencies to show them that when they do that homework that they are not enjoying and that they really prefer not to do, that they're actually gaining skills that are going to help them later on in life, right? And I could say it until I'm blue in the face, and I do say it until I'm blue in the face. But if I show them in a way what they do and how those things translate directly to things that they've accumulated, then I believe that that will help them to understand and maybe, you know, not roll their eyes every time I talk about homework. So what we did was we took a few of those: communication, research, teamwork, professionalism, and technology. We took those skills and took the grade book of this course. Our students will recognize this. And again, they get shivers looking at some of these things. And talk about whether when they achieve a certain threshold on things, when they do better than a certain threshold, this is 50%, they have to do 50% or better on a quiz that's on chapter 1 of the homework, then they get a research credit. They get acknowledgement for doing some research in critical thinking. They're spending some of their time researching things about psychology. Same thing last week, as I mentioned, our students gave wonderful psych disorders presentations, and they gained a lot of credits. They gained communication credit and teamwork credit for the presentation. They gained additional credit for the PowerPoint that they turned in, and then they have the additional homeworks that they turn in. And some of these things I was telling the students before, when they do their Excel graphs as part of their homework, they gain a lot of technology points, and that's a good way to increase their technology points. So this is our first class that we're kind of really going over what we've accumulated so far. So the point is that this will allow students to understand, you know, when they're sitting reading their textbook, they're not necessarily focusing only on what the content is, but recognizing that that's a skill that is good for them to have. And when they do it on time, when they complete the homework assignments by the deadline in the class, they gain professionalism and time management credit, which is really good and also important for the workforce. So not only do we accumulate how many points each person gets in the class, but we look at their teams. So we look at the teams and their peer leaders and see how the teams are doing in each class. And so this is our big reveal for the class right before we're 2 minutes over their time. But right before they break away with their peer leaders, this is the first time they're seeing their leaderboard. Are you ready? Psyched Out is leading the pack right now. Lucky Seven's right behind them. And like I said to the group before, so yellow's there, Harmony, and Suicide Squad. And Suicide Squad, there's a reason, and Mariana and I have been in contact. And, you know, one of the things that happens in teams is that we're dependent upon the work of all the team members, right? So some team members might need a little bit of a kick. Some we have not seen yet, you know, so reaching out to them and making sure that they're here and engaged and that they're going to participate. And when they come back to you guys, welcome them back in and say, hey, we could use your credits. Come on in. Let's go. Let's do this, right? The other thing that I said is it is still really early. So while, you know, Psyched Out might be thinking that they're going to be running away with this thing, the majority of tokens have not been accumulated yet. So I've seen these things change drastically. So I want to break this down and spend a minute just with the class to show where this is coming from. So they can't see it here. Oh, sorry. Let me just move my. So we have the orange is the communication, blue is professionalism, purple is technology, and yellow is what? Research probably. And teamwork is not showing up. And I explained that to the class before. We're going to get a lot of teamwork credits that are going to show up. And so just before the classes break out, the big difference between these groups seems to be blue. So what makes your blue increase getting in homeworks on time? There's two things: showing up at the beginning of class and doing the question of the day, and submitting homeworks on time. Those are the two ways that you get blue tokens. And blue tokens are limitless. Most of these graphs are going to be full of blue because in theory, a student can turn everything in on time, show up to every class and do the question of the day. And so that you're getting, you know, I think we have something like 60 things that we count over this class, and all 60 of them you can get professionalism credit. So blue makes the difference. That's the way it's been working for last semester, and it seems to be working that way now. But you know, you can always gain additional tokens. There's the other thing that I mentioned to the class that I'll say, and then I'll let you guys go break out, is we have something called ICU credits, which is I, C, and U, but I see you. And your peer leaders can nominate you guys for ICU credits. And that doesn't happen by you saying, hey, get us some ICU credits. It happens by you doing things that they are recognizing and realizing that you're doing a good job. So each week when we meet, we have a meeting Sundays at 7 p.m. and we talk about the progress of the class. And this is when they can say, hey, so-and-so in my group has been doing a lot to really help the other students, or something like that. And then we decide that we're going to give ICU credits. There's only a limited amount that we give, so it's not going to make a huge difference in these graphs, but it's also something nice. The last thing I'm going to say before we break with you guys is, as I mentioned before, even if your team is not the top team at the end of the semester, you can still win as the individual prize. So the top overall student and the top team that gets the most tokens wins. You know, we have some prizes that we give out at the end of the semester. We'll have a little party, but you know, being the top overall student accounts for something too. Okay, you guys can quietly and break out and start going to your stuff, and we'll meet back here at 2:30, okay? All right, everybody else. And like I said, I'll post these slides if you guys want to see how the blockchain stuff works. You're going to see it from me next week anyway. So all of what I mentioned to you now, I've sung the praises of blockchain, but nothing that I showed you so far has anything to do with blockchain. So where does blockchain come in? So all of the credits that we're accounting for the students can be translated into tokens, and those tokens can be put on to, okay. Yeah, just hang out for a little while. Hey, Harmony, you guys got to meet with Jackie on Zoom. All right. So the Zoom is in Blackboard, okay? Sorry, guys. So all of the tokens can be shared with the student, obviously, can be demonstrated in a class presentation, but we want people to see them beyond the classroom. And this is where I think blockchain becomes very interesting, right? That we can do a presentation of public data of student achievement. So as a professor, I will lose my job if I ever take a student's grade and put it online so that the whole world can see. But yet I can take these achievements that students complete and put it online in an anonymized way, and the student can see it, their team can see it, and somebody in Singapore can see it if they wanted to see what the students are accomplishing. So here's the workflow, right? So the student does what they're supposed to do as part of their class. The work is entered into a grade book, and the skills required to perform the assignment are evaluated. So we figure out which skills map to which NACE competency skills, which homework assignments map to which NACE competencies. Then we mint the tokens, which I'll show you in a second, I'm doing right now. And then the NFTs are transferred to the students. So we use something called non-fungible tokens, which are things that we can place on the blockchain, which are nice because they're unique indicators of something I can give to a student to say, here is your token that is your token that belongs to you for this specific task on this specific day and time. So I'm gonna stop my slideshow for a second right now. Hey guys, maybe go across the hall for a little while. Yeah. So let me share my screen. Okay. So this terminal is black and white. It's not very exciting and sexy to look at, but this is live token minting. Okay. Yeah, you can go find it. Thanks. So this is our tokens. I'm taking the students' grades, converting them to tokens, and posting them all on a blockchain called Ethereum. So they are now, as we speak, this is waiting at the bottom of this this terminal window. You can probably see something waiting for confirmation with a little spinning bar. Can you see that? Am I showing you the right thing? So you see a bunch of purple. So each time this happens, it's reaching across the network and it's saying this person who is my public key wants to send a token to this other person who's one of the students in this class. And then everybody else in the blockchain is verifying that I am a good person, not a good person, they don't know me, but that I'm actually capable of sending correct, accurate information. So they judge me. And just like when they say to send tokens, my computer judges them and says, yep, this person has done everything they said they were going to do all along. We trust this source, right? Then once the token goes on the blockchain, then it gets verified all over again. And all of the tokens that are coming in across the blockchain and Ethereum are being verified on a regular basis. This is the block here. This shows you where it is. These are all going to be in the same block. And then at some point, the block gets updated. And then it goes, then it goes to a new block. So that's that. That's one thing. The other thing I'm going to show you is on the other end of it. So what happens when I talk about these NFTs and these tokens? What do they look like? And I'll paste this in the chat for you guys. So these are tokens. These aren't the tokens I'm minting right now. This is the previous token, just so you can see the different variety of them. I put the web address in there. You can go see for yourself. So there are about 6,000 tokens from a class of about 30 people last semester. And these are all the credits that they've accumulated. And we can drill down to one particular token. So the students go on, they choose the avatar that they like, and then we go on and get the tokens. And each of these tokens has something important. That's what the token looks like there. Sorry, let me move this. Each of these tokens has something important, which is metadata. So metadata is information about what the token is. It's a Hidden Figures presentation. So this was a PowerPoint presentation that students gave. And this is a token for teamwork. So they get teamwork credits here. And this is some of the information about when it was uploaded and some other information about it. We are also now adding other metadata about what group they're in and what class they were part of, so that we can, on the other side of the blockchain, pull down their data. And I can now, the graph that I showed you here, this leaderboard, I can reproduce the same exact leaderboard from across the blockchain. Meaning, if I didn't know the students' grades and any other information about them before, I can now scrape the blockchain, pull the same data, and create the same exact leaderboard, right? And that the beauty of that is that now a third party, whether that be an app developer or whoever, can get all the data from my class, can make apps for my students with all of the data that's up in the blockchain, and it's all publicly available. The app developer has no idea of the student's name, doesn't know anything about the student other than their public key address, and then can pull down all their information for them. So if a student logs on and says, this is my public key, they can get individualized, they get a wallet that shows all the tokens that they have, and then individualized data to show where they are, show how their team is, show how their class is doing. And we can do this for classes all at the same time. So we're running 2 sections of this now. This is a leaderboard for my class. We're creating a leaderboard for the other class, but then we're going to have a grand leaderboard for both sections. And if we were doing 100 sections of Psych 100, we could do exactly the same thing. Once the data are up in the blockchain, it's really limitless. We can do really anything with it. Am I sharing my slide deck?
Yes, Dan.
Okay, thanks. So that's so the idea is that everyone can see the accomplishments, right? And so we mint, so you saw a little bit of the minting process and how we do that. All of that is just coming from a server where I'm uploading student achievements. We don't have their name up there or anything, so we're not violating any FERPA, but we're just associating things with their public key and say the person with this public key has done these things. And then all of that is completely anonymized because I don't even know the public keys of my students. So I couldn't tell you who has done what. So some NFTs, you've probably heard the term NFT before, and some of them are worth lots of money. These NFTs that we are minting are worth nothing, right? I'm minting them on a test network. And so the students can't sell the NFTs, which is usually one of the first questions they ask. I mean, they're welcome to try. I don't know if anybody would give them money for it, but the reason that NFTs can amass a lot of money is because they are unique. So when I give a student an NFT, a Pebble token, it is for that student only, for that assignment only. So it's unique to that experience. So I'm saying you did a good job on this particular assignment on this date and time, and here is my token to you. And what I put into that, what you saw with that, you know, the thing that I get excited about in the terminal, but everybody looks at it and gets bored, is me actually putting stuff on the network, on the blockchain, and me verifying that I gave something to the student, that the student received this from me, and there will never be another one of that token. It's the only one that exists for that student at that time. And just give you an example, we saw some of these before, and these are all worth $0, not worth anything, unfortunately, for the students. And as I mentioned, we can pull them from across the blockchain and do whatever we want with them because they're immutable. They're going to live there forever. So long after I'm gone and the students are gone and do other things, these pebbles will be up in their existence, and they can, you know, if somebody is a potential employer, they can say, here's my list of accomplishments that I did, right? So obviously the goal is that this lives, you know, we can extend this to other courses and to whole programs so that students can show a whole program's worth of accumulation of skills that they've developed. I know that this is a lecture series about AI, so I wanted to talk about AI for a second. So if I had, you know, this idea is something that I had in 2020. We wrote a proposal for American Council on Education, and it wasn't funded. And part of the reason I think it wasn't funded is because I didn't have a clear idea of how this was all going to work. And so one of the real nice things about AI is that it can kind of take you out of your comfort zone. And if you have an issue that you're trying to think about how to solve, you can talk through things with, you know, like a knowledgeable peer leader almost, right? Somebody who you can say, I want to do this thing. Is it possible? And so what I told AI, what I told ChatGPT was that, you know, I have kids at home and I want to give them tokens on the blockchain for performing chores as part of their daily routine. How would I go about doing something like that? And AI gave me a few different options, and you know, through multiple sort of conversations, we kind of worked out a workflow that would be workable for the students in my class and that we could do, you know, and that was, you know, 7 or 8 months ago. And now here we are doing this thing, right? And I've never, you know, done this sort of thing before. I've never used blockchain before from a coding perspective. And so it really helps you to do those things and try new things. And that's, you know, it's not, I tell students all the time that I encourage them to use AI, but not to answer questions for them, but to guide them in the right direction. That's really the best way. Does somebody have a question? I'm almost done, and then we could take any questions. The other way that we're thinking about using AI is to create bot leaders. So allowing each little group, each team to come up with their own bot, create their own bot that has all of the information. The textbook that we use in this class is open source, so it's freely available to them. And so we can train the AI with a lot of Psychology 100 information. And again, their job is not to answer quiz questions for the students, but again, to point them in the right direction when they have questions. You know, we had students presenting on schizophrenia last week, and we might ask an AI bot to say, you know, I want to present some interesting cases in schizophrenia. Can you please direct me to some good resources where I might find that information? And the AI might be able to help point them in that direction. So our next step, and the most important step, is to assess the program and make sure it works. So we have these pebbles, students are receiving them, they're meeting with their peer leaders right now. Last semester, we did the same project. We compared the results to the same class that was taught a year earlier without Pebble format. And we saw a more than 50% increase in A, Bs, and Cs. So our DFW rate decreased by more than half. Yes. And we see that students are turning in more assignments, turning them in on time. So it seems to be really effective in helping the students. The other thing that we're curious about is whether this will continue beyond the course, right? Whether students will keep in touch with their peer leader and their peers, and whether they create learning communities that can continue on beyond the course. We also want to test the limits of Pebble in much larger classrooms, like 600 students, see how it works. And also, nothing about what I showed you is anything particular to psychology. We were explicitly and purposefully agnostic to discipline. We wanted to build something that we could plug into computer science or English or math or any discipline, because all of those disciplines, students are gaining skills that go beyond what that discipline is about. And so we want to be able to do this in multiple different classes. We're already talking to computer science and math programs about developing it there. And everything we built will at some point be open source. So in my dream, a professor will say, I want to do this Pebble thing. We'll have a place where they can upload an empty grade book, rank how each assignment maps onto the skills that we are looking at. And then once they put in a loaded textbook, a loaded grade book, all of the tokens will start minting for their students. So we're working on that workflow. That's part of our NSF program, is to develop this open source tool so that other professors can do it. And I think that's it. So happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
So there are a couple of questions in the chat. Do you
Okay.
want me to read them out, or would you like to just?
I can read them. I'll start
Okay.
from the beginning. Jasper wrote, while blockchain confirms the transaction that took place truly happened, it seems that it does not verify the quality of the product produced. Would this not create an issue with the eventual product if the quality or parts are not more or less the same? That's a really great question, Jasper. So you're talking, I think, about when I was talking about the blockchain in supply chain, right? And so one of the things that would happen is you would have quality control experts built into the blockchain, right? So before it goes, you know, if it goes from the nails to this person who's 3D printing a piece of plastic, before it goes to the store, you would have another gig person, another person who makes money by just inspecting these things and then passing them on. And you can take nodes out of the network if somebody doesn't do a good job. So if somebody is not consistent in their quality or not producing enough, then essentially they get discontinued from the network, and then somebody else takes their place. I hope that answers your question, but that's the idea, is that the blockchain builds into it people who are checking other people to do it. We've had this idea, something similar, to do blockchain related peer review in scientific publishing. And I haven't got it all mapped out yet, but it's sort of the same idea, that somebody can verify me, hopefully as an expert in a particular field. And then when I publish things, it goes through a series of other experts in that field, and they do the peer review. And this way we don't have to give Elsevier and all these other companies lots of money. Okay, and Nasser asked, what do you think about what's going on in the court between Craig Wright and Satoshi? I actually don't know about that. I'm going to look it up, though, unless you want to tell me something about it, Nasser. So Satoshi Nakamoto, for people who don't know, is as I mentioned, the developer of Bitcoin, but has not stepped forward to claim it. Is this somebody who's saying he's Satoshi?
Yeah. Yes. It's
So,
Craig. Huh?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Craig, right? It's he's claiming that he's Satoshi. There's a court going on right now. His tokens, it's BSV, which I bought a couple of them because I'm hoping that he wins. The he has been claiming it for a while for now, and he has like the white papers and stuff like that. So he has a lot of proof. Hopefully he wins.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. It's from a psychology perspective, it's really interesting how, you know, it was a very smart idea to launch Bitcoin without a founder, because in those days, you know, if you know the algorithm of what created Bitcoin, it makes it much more hackable. So you could recreate the whole chain, and try to modify it and hack it. So so it was a smart move not to come forward at first, but you know the person eventually needs to come forward. There's been rumors about a group of people, you know, and collective, you know, there's conspiracy theories of government doing it. So there's all really interesting things, but I'll check out Craig Wright. That's a really good tip. I'm going to check it out.
I thought you were Satoshi, Dan.
You're not supposed to blow his cover, Effie.
Yeah. No way. I still don't understand how it all works.
So we welcome any further questions in the chat. And in the meantime, maybe I could ask a question. Dr. McCloskey, for those of us who are complete novices at this and wanted to, let's say, convert our classroom into starting to use blockchain, I guess it's a two-part question. What would be our first steps, and how long do you think it would take a beginning person to start using this in the classroom effectively?
I think right now it would take over a year, because I'm planning to use the next year to make it overnight for everyone.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, so I think, I mean, there's nothing so special about this, that the idea is I want other people to do it, right? So I want to write down, you know, a step-by-step process, probably a publication with the steps, and then share all of what we built as an open source tool. And that's sort of my pet project by summer of 2025. So, but you know, if somebody sees what we're doing and wants to replicate it, more power to them. I think it would be great, you know. So I think, you know, the thing that I've heard about blockchain, which is true, when it's working right, you won't even know that it's there, right? So it'll just be, ideally, it would be me or a professor uploading a grade book, and then on an app, my students have seeing these NFTs and seeing the accumulation, seeing the graphs and stuff of how they accumulate. And I hope, you know, I hope that it gets to that point where a few years from now, somebody could be using this tool, and then somebody asks them about blockchain and they say, well, what's blockchain? I don't know what that is, right? So I hope that it's that seamless, that you don't need to know what the backbone of it is for it to be working for you.
Okay, so there are a couple of more questions in the chat. Maybe I can ask a quick follow-up to that one before going on. And that is, do you have a sense of whether this is starting to take off? Are a lot of professors starting to embrace blockchain technology in the classroom? And do you sort of forecast that it's going to eventually become quite common?
I have not seen many. When we last looked, which was a few months ago, there was most of the blockchain around education is about two things, is about financial, so student loan, managing student loans without some kind of bank managing it, or student diplomas, a way that they, you know, students don't have to go through the registrar and pay a fee to get their transcript, for example. So those are the two places where education and blockchain are really hot. In the classroom, I have to be honest, I think we are the first to do it, because we couldn't find any evidence of it before. There was a person who suggested using it for creating peer groups across, like almost having a classroom across the world. So like a distributed classroom type of thing, which is also very interesting, but a little different than what we're trying to do here. So I've never seen NFTs as a token of a student work in a classroom. I think we're the first to do that, but you know, there's a big world out there, so who knows? But
that means you're really trailblazing then, and that's important.
Or naive, right? Or not good enough. One or the other. I'm happy with either though.
So you have two really interesting questions in the chat now.
Okay. I'm going to answer the second one first, Chunchu, which is a really good question. So Bitcoin, so one of the criticisms of blockchain in general is that it is very bad for the environment because you need lots of high-powered computers to do something called proof of work. So for a computer to participate in the Bitcoin blockchain, you need a really strong computer, and it has to do a lot of hashing functions, a lot of problem solving to show that it's committed to doing this work. And the big criticism about it is that it is very bad for the environment to have all of these computers using so much energy and electricity. We are running on Ethereum, which is better, but not perfect. It requires a proof of stake instead of a proof of work, which is much less demanding on computers. So you don't need a big computer structure. So my server, I have a computer on a server, which is just a regular computer that's running in the Ethereum network. And it's only running when I'm, you know, so when you saw me making those transactions, while it was waiting for me to, for the transaction to be approved, it was looking at other people's transactions at the same time. And so it's only really running when I'm running it, which is nice. And it's nice. It's a nice feature of having a big network like Ethereum. I'm looking at other networks like Cardano that is even more environmentally friendly. And it's something that I do care about and I think a lot about. I don't want to create this thing that is bad, you know, and problematic. For me to give a student a little, you know, image file shouldn't be polluting the environment. So so I think it's a really important question, and I think blockchain developers are getting better at finding out how to do it. And we will probably move to another blockchain at some point because we are on something called a test net right now, which means that all the transactions are free. And that's great for us, but we probably will do something on a mainnet where it's more well-known and more visible. So right now our students have to really hunt to find their tokens, and I want to make it so that they can find them more easily. And so we'll probably be moving blockchains at some point. But we will be conscious of making sure that we do something that's environmentally friendly. And I see Tansen's question. I know that there's a lot of opportunities besides being a developer as a computer science guy, but the other day, NVIDIA CEO said that a kid doesn't need to learn coding. AI will do it for them. Are we near to replacing humans if we talk about the next 10, 20 years? It's a really good question. Really, really good question. I rely on AI to help me a lot with coding, but I think, like, you know, if I give the example, so me and ChatGPT worked this thing out, how we would work out this ecosystem through a conversation, but I needed to drive that conversation, and I needed to have the vision of what we wanted to do. And I think we will always need people to do that. The coders of tomorrow will probably be people who have really good ways of communicating with AI and are really skilled at it and knowing how to ask the right question. But I think, you know, and the other thing is, like, it will help coders know more languages because AI can help translate things. And, you know, one of the things that's really nice about ChatGPT, and that's really the one I've been using the most, is that it comes from a teaching place. So if I run part of my code and I get an error, I can use ChatGPT to help me debug my code, but it will always show me what it was wrong. And I prefer my way to, rather than just try to run something and see what's wrong, I try to learn from what I'm learning from ChatGPT And the next time I have something like that, I'll try to remember and always try to research it on my own how to do it. And then I always take a stab at it. And if I can't do it, then I'll share my error message. So I think there's some idea that, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's a really good question, and it's hard to, there's no crystal ball, right? But I do see that, you know, as somebody who took I took a Unix class, and I rely on ChatGPT to help me with my coding a lot these days. So I wasn't well trained in coding, and it opened up doors for me. So I'm sure there's many other people like me that are like that. So it does mean that people who are trained in coding will have to think of new ways to be visionary and think about how to code things rather than what to code.
Would anyone else like to pose a question on the chat? Oh, you do have Austin has a question.
Yep. You talked about decentralization. The implications of that sound very scary, essentially replacing a person with technology. It feels like soon the students might be replaced as well, not just the teaching methods. That's a really good question. And I showed you there was a place where the professor was X'd out, right? One of the things that we did intentionally when we built this was we're using the technology to bring the people together, right? It would be cheaper and more efficient for me to give each group of students an AI bot to work with instead of a peer leader. But there's really important that they meet with these students and learn from them, because an AI bot is not going to say, hey, I went to your high school, or I know your cousin Lenny, right? It doesn't have that level of connection. And that connection is super important for students. And we need students. We are not replacing students. No way. We need students. We have the creativity. The creativity, I think, out of everything that's going to happen, you know, and I used some examples of AI generated images in my talk, right? So I can say I would like to create an image of a student reading a book, right? And AI can do it very quickly. But again, that creativity and my vision, I do it 6 times. I'm like, not that student, not that book, do this, you know. So we need to drive it. It's a tool that we need to be able to use, but it can't work without us. It needs us. It needs our creativity. And we need each other, you know. And one of the problems of what technology does is it tends to push us apart from each other, but we need it to bring each other together. And that's what we're doing in this. I'm using the technology to get students together in small group settings. And the technology is helping me do that and giving them excuse to get together because I'm showing these tokens and they're getting excited about it. So I don't know if you know, they saw their first leaderboard for the first time, and the room gets a little animated. They're excited about it. So Lewis says, kind of like a genie in a lamp, one must be specific when entering data to use, which constantly needs refining. That's 100% right, right? So it's the thing that computer people always have said is garbage in, garbage out, right? So, and I teach my students, you know, and my kids, don't avoid this because it's going to be around. Learn how to use it correctly. It's not there to answer questions for you, right? It's not there to tell you things. It's not there to teach you. It doesn't replace me. It doesn't. It's there to point you in the right direction of where to gain information. So that's how you use it. As I think of it as, I don't have any brothers. I have an older sister, right? But she's not a computer geek, right? But I think of it as somebody who's really knowledgeable about things and says, you might want to look at this. That's what I love about AI, is pointing me in the right direction of things.
Do we have any additional questions? So we are actually, we have gone over time. It is 2:10. Dr. McCloskey, would you like to say any kind of concluding words?
Just, I think first of all, the questions were really excellent, and you guys are honing in on exactly the right questions and things that I think about a lot, right? And I think working together as groups amongst our peers and sharing ideas there's nothing that it will ever beat that. That is the best thing that we can do for our own professional development and personal development. So think about how you can leverage technology to bring you around more people. I think that's the best thing you could use it for.
Okay, well, thank you so much for this this extremely interesting. Actually, you have one more comment from Luis in the chat.
I'm looking at the cartoon Wally, human contact and emotion is needed. That's true. Yeah, I like that. That's great.
Yeah, that's a very good way to end, right?
Yeah.
To remind us that humans still have a purpose here. So
There's one last thing that I do want to say, because I know I've gone over, but I'm a huge fan of the CRSP program. Since I've known about it, it's really amazing. And by the way, it's doing exactly what I'm preaching here, right? So one of the things that I wanted to do was rebuild what I have in the research and lab environment in a regular classroom. And so we see the effects of CRSP, and you guys are great for doing it. And I hope you're getting a lot out of it, because it's a really, really wonderful experience for you.
fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. McCloskey. And on behalf of CRSP and the CRSP Tech Fellows Program, we're delighted with this. We'd like to also invite everybody to the next talk, which is happening in 2 weeks on March 15th, which will be about AI, security, and quantum. So we did have a question. I just want to let everybody know we had a question about the recording of this. It will be posted on our webpage, the CRSP Tech Fellows webpage, on Monday, and we will also make it available by sending it out to those who registered. So thanks, everyone, and have a good weekend.
Thank you, Dan. That was great.
It
My
was.
pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Great to see you guys.
Great
Take
seeing
care.
you.
Goodbye.
Have a nice weekend, Ron.
You too, Christina, and thank you for the help.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm glad I was able to be helpful. That was a great presentation.
Yeah, it was you know, and quite a unique one, right? Because
Yeah.
you know, this idea of how to incorporate blockchain into the classroom and how to, you know, sort of decentralize access to learning is interesting. And those questions about what happens to us, right, in the instructional side, as AI moves along, we're all wondering.
Yeah, well, that's a big concern for us in you know, my other gig in the tutoring center, because there's a huge drop in students coming for writing tutoring and a huge increase in texts we're seeing that do not look like, you know, they're authentic student texts. So we're kind of getting squeezed out, but they need us more than ever.
Yeah, good point. Well, maybe it's just a little bit of a learning process, right? That they'll learn that they're still, you know, right now with ChatGPT being sort of new and exciting, but maybe we'll move away from complete reliance on it. And
That's a great point.
we hope. So
we can always hope.
right. So I'll close the meeting now, and thanks everyone who's remaining.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Thanks, Luis, for the good questions and the comments.